Last week, I made a video on liberal Christianity, or you could say progressive Christianity. The two terms are basically interchangeable. And at the time, I did not intend to do a follow-up, certainly not this quickly. But I came across a live stream, and I really feel like it demands some sort of response. So I guess you could consider this video to be the right-wing mirror image of that form of Christianity which I described last week. Both are quite similar modern idolatrous bastardizations of the same religion. They are unmistakably modern. If you were to try to introduce either of these heresies to almost any Christian over the vast majority of the past 2,000 years, it would not only be totally rejected, but it would also seem totally foreign to any type of heresy that they were used to. And this could go for anyone from John Calvin to Martin Luther to St. Augustine or Thomas Aquinas. They are idolatrous because they are putting the personal political views of the believer ahead of what God and the Bible clearly teaches. And they are bastardizations because believing either of these two heresies destroys key parts of Christianity. Now, the way that these three descriptors cover progressive Christianity should be pretty obvious. I don't think many people in my audience need me to explain that, but I will briefly just for clarity's sake. To take one of the most obvious examples for the modernness of progressive Christianity, if you were to present any of the passages from St. Paul or other biblical authors on certain types of sexual immorality to almost any Christian for almost all of the past 2,000 years, and if you were to claim that they aren't actually talking about the type of immorality that they appear to be talking about, this would just seem like an absurd assertion. Yet, this very assertion is the official interpretation of many major progressive churches today. It is idolatrous because, as I said, the believer is putting their own personal views on morality and politics ahead of what the Bible clearly teaches. It is clearly ridiculous to assume everyone has been interpreting these passages wrongly for the past 2,000 years, and that just as the LGBT movement took over all of society, so did the churches realize that, yeah, this is actually the correct interpretation. The direction that this goes in is very clear to any honest observer. And it is a bastardization because it flattens the actual moral prescriptions given by God and his apostles, and it replaces them with vague modern sentiments. And soon, I think we will find that these same three labels are very aptly applied to libertarian Christianity too. With that said, I would like to make one disclaimer. You cannot be a good Christian and a progressive, at least not in the way that progressive is ordinarily understood. You can be a good Christian and a libertarian. What I am condemning here is not Christians who happen to be libertarians. That is, Christians who think that a libertarian society is the best way to promote Christian morality. I would find such an argument unconvincing, but it's not particularly theologically objectionable. What I mean by libertarian Christianity is people who understand their Christianity through their libertarianism. And I think soon we will see that is what's happening. Okay, I'm getting way ahead of myself, though. What even was the interaction that spurred on this discussion to begin with? There actually were two. The main one was a live stream hosted by Academic Agent, in which Based Liz was arguing against drug prohibition, but there actually was one other thing. A series of 2 comments, I believe, left by a libertarian on one of my videos about a week ago. This is, of course, totally unconnected to the other live stream, but it did get my head in this space a little bit before I even saw said live stream. This commenter said that God is an anarcho-capitalist, and that there are many libertarian studies that demonstrate this. Now, I'm not going to go through the specifics of these comments, though they were quite detailed, and debunk it line by line, but I do think it's interesting to bring up, just to show that this isn't an isolated phenomena. All I'll say in response to that comment is the idea that the rule of theocratic judges in ancient Israel amounts to anarcho-capitalism is on its face ridiculous. But okay, moving on to the main show. Academic Agent's drug prohibition stream. The stream was quite self-explanatory. It was mainly a debate between 2 people, Based Liz and a guy from South Africa, on whether or not drugs should be criminalized. The guy from South Africa had a lot of studies and knowledge on the topic to try and prove that drug prohibition is actually quite effective when done properly, and based Liz didn't really care much for any of that because she had a principled objection that prohibiting what people put in their own bodies is just wrong, and that it should not be done. It may sometimes make for a boring conversation, but to be fair to Liz, there isn't anything at all wrong with a principled objection against a data-driven argument. If someone came up to me and tried to convince me that abortion was good, and they really knew their statistics, and they really knew how to prove that there were many, many great societal benefits from it, I wouldn't care, even if they could somehow show that more lives are saved than killed in abortion. I still wouldn't care, because abortion's evil. Principles always should come first before data. The issue here, of course, are the principles in question, and how they are arrived at. In the livestream, Liz says that she's the principled one here, because non-libertarians just want to ban anything that they don't like. Well, she actually has a specific, clear principle for how far she's willing to go in any sort of banning. She says that prohibitions should never exceed what are in the laws of the Old Testament. That is, things which are not banned in the Old Testament should not be banned, and things that are banned should not have any harsher laws than those Old Testament bans. She says that such bans do not need to exist, but if you are going to ban things, those are the guidelines. Now, honestly, when I heard that, I don't know, did I laugh? Was I confused? Both, probably. It's the strangest interpretation of the Old Testament I've ever heard. I don't know, maybe this is just my profound ignorance, but I was an evangelical for most of my life, and I've never heard anyone articulate anything like this standard ever before. Perhaps I'm just more ignorant of evangelical theology than I thought I was, though it's quite strange, to be honest. This principle alone is quite strange, and quite damaging to the scriptures. Any Christian will know one of the most common atheist attacks against Christianity is, why don't you follow the laws in the Old Testament? Don't you know it says don't mix fabrics? Don't you know it says not to use this type of blade when shaving your face? Now, to anyone that knows the absolute most basics of theology or even the Bible, these attacks are meaningless, they're stupid. The Old Testament laws were never meant to be a universal set of moral guidelines. Leviticus, in particular, is very clear. Throughout the entire book, it repeats the phrase, "These are the commandments that the Lord commanded Moses for the people of Israel on Mount Sinai. These are the statutes and rules and laws that the Lord made between himself and the people of Israel through Moses on Mount Sinai." These similar phrases are beaten through your head throughout the whole book. They keep on happening, almost as a message to future generations, to the Christians, that these aren't a universal set of laws, just in case there was any mistake in that. The idea that the civil law code for ancient Israel should be a standard by which all law codes anywhere should be judged is just ridiculous. But okay. I know Liz would say that I'm strawmanning here. As I've already said, she didn't say that those law codes must be enforced for Christians. All she said is that those laws should be the maximum extent of any sort of prohibitions within Christian societies. But that doesn't help her case anyways to begin with. Just as those laws were never meant to be a universal set of moral commandments, they also were never meant to be a universal standard for the maximum extent of all laws anywhere. You don't have laws in the Old Testament regulating the internet, and you don't have laws in the Old Testament regulating internet dirty videos, because they didn't exist 3,000 years ago. God didn't need to give those laws to the children of Israel, because they weren't relevant to them. And that is, of course, specifically why she is using these laws, that they weren't made for our society. That's what makes them so useful to her as a libertarian. Because, of course, if you actually read through Leviticus or Deuteronomy, or any of the other Old Testament laws, you will not see a code for something that looks in any way libertarian. And again, as I said previously, neither were the judges that enforced these laws in any way libertarian. The reason that her appealing to these laws is useful is because they were made to deal with the concerns that the ancient Israelites had. They were not made to deal with the concerns of modern people. So, for a libertarian, it's very useful to say only these laws, because most modern people don't have the same concerns as ancient Israelites. This arbitrary standard is thus incredibly useful for binding modern people and trying to force them into a libertarian framework, even though the framework of these laws themselves are in no way libertarian. Though if we do want to look at these Old Testament laws for a moment, we'll quickly see that they don't even live up to the same standards that she is espousing. One of the most common phrases that she repeated several times throughout the debate, and I'm sure we've all heard libertarians repeat millions of times, is that I don't believe you have a right to tell people what they can and can't put in their own body. Now, the moral bankruptcy of that statement on its own is quite interesting, but that's beyond the scope of this video. I just want to look at that statement from a biblical perspective. And to be specific, an Old Testament legal perspective. Were there any Old Testament laws which prohibited people from choosing what they can and cannot put inside their own body? Well, the most obvious example of this is there's a whole big list of laws prohibiting many different types of sexual immorality. And I don't want to get too graphic for anyone, but sexual immorality generally involves putting things inside your body or inside other people's body. Some of these laws do include non-consensual activities, but many of the other ones do include consensual activities. Now, is that being overly literal? I don't think so. If the standard is the government can't tell you what you can and can't put in your body, why should that be the case for drugs and food, but not the case for these types of activities? In the case of the consensual ones, neither have anything to do with causing direct physical harm to some non-consenting individual. Trying to read any sort of libertarianism into the Old Testament is just futile. It just obviously is not there. Okay, let's now move over to the New Testament, because as I've already said, the Old Testament civil statutes don't really have anything to do with how Christians have to be governed. So let's see the general principles that the Bible does actually lay down for government, and a Christian's relationship to it. The most obvious passage to this topic is Romans 13, 1-7, which I'm sure Liz has read many times because it's quite famous. I'll just read out the whole section. Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive his approval. For he is God's servant, for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain, for he is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. Therefore, one must be in subjugation, not only to avoid God's wrath, but also for the sake of conscience. For because of this you also pay taxes, for the authorities are ministers of God, attending to this very thing. Pay to all what is owed to them, taxes to whom taxes are owed, revenue to whom revenue is owed, respect to whom respect is owed, honor to whom honor is owed. I shouldn't even have to go on. That passage alone should make this whole issue so blatantly clear. The idea that the Bible is in any way libertarian should be so easily dismissed by just that I shouldn't even need to explain this. But I will, just to make it even clearer. Let's repeat one of those verses, 13:2. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. Those who resist what the authorities have done will incur judgment. And just so we're clear, we're referring to the Roman Empire here. This is the civil authority which St. Paul is telling us not to resist. Now, is there some logical limit to this non-resistance? Are we not supposed to obey unjust laws? Yes, probably. But the point is the passage so blatantly makes clear that there is a general duty to obey civil authorities. And to make it clear why this is also important, Liz repeated the common libertarian trope in the debate that you shouldn't ban these things, because banning it means that people from the government with weapons will go and put their weapons at people's heads if they refuse to obey these laws. Now, again, from a secular perspective, maybe this could be an interesting argument. Maybe this is something I'd have to deal with if there was some secular libertarian proposing this to me. Because, of course, what is being done here is the moral responsibility from the lawbreaker is being flipped, and they're trying to impose it on the lawgiver. But if we already agree on the common moral framework of the Bible, then that's all besides the point, because we agree on Romans 13 too. Whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. The Bible makes quite clear right here that the person with the moral responsibility is the person subject to the laws. The person incurring judgment is not the lawgiver. The person incurring judgment is the person that refuses to obey the law. To return to those three descriptors from much earlier in the video, I think we can now see that libertarian Christianity can justly have all three of them applied to it. It is unmistakably modern because these libertarian platitudes would be hardly accepted by anyone over the vast majority of the history of Christianity. It is idolatrous because it's putting the modern believer's personal political views ahead of what the Bible clearly teaches on the relationship between the citizen and their government. And it bastardizes the Bible because it flips on its head what the Bible actually teaches about government. Thanks for watching. Please donate to my subscribe star if you enjoy this content, and please make sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, and share these videos with anyone who you think might find it interesting. And just in case anyone hasn't heard yet, the stream with Sargon has been postponed till the 25th, and a special thanks to my donors, Emmett Vestry, Lita, Seth Apex, King of Evil Florida and the Moon, Josiah, Adzutko, Hexorius, Quo Pergranator, and Charismatic Byzantine. Thank you everyone very much for watching, and goodbye.